Okay, ma'am, go on.
Okay. Good afternoon. This afternoon's session is on the licensing, registration, and enforcement of the Food Safety and Standards Act of India, including the rules and regulations. So, if you please give me a minute. Kaushal, at the FSSA rules and regulations, we have the licensing and registration of food businesses as one chapter. We have the packaging and labeling. We have the food product standards and food additives, prohibition and restriction on sales, contaminants, toxins, and residues, laboratory and sampling analysis. This was initially with the first rules and regulations, which were enacted on August 5th, 2011. Since then, a large number of amendments had taken place, and we have now, along with this, a few extra regulations, which include the fortification of foods, organic foods, the food import regulations, the food recall regulations, as I was mentioning this morning, advertising and claims. We have for alcoholic beverages. In 2015, we had a regulation for food and health supplements, nutraceuticals, foods for special medical use. So you can see that the regulations are being amended from time to time, and they get included, and the final regulation comes as a gazette notification. All these rules and regulations are now notified in the Gazette. So once they are notified, they are implementable in every state of India, and all food business operators have to abide by these regulations. So if you look at the enforcement structure, that is the enforcement of the rules and regulations, we have at the center and at the state, we have the state food commissioner, who is overall in charge of the implementation. So the responsibility of the implementation lies with the state food commissioner or the territories, the independent territories, union territories food commissioners. Most of the states have food commissioners who have been appointed by them, and most of them are bureaucrats. Under the state food commissioner, you have in the district, at the district level, at every district, there is expected to be a designated officer or a DO. The designated officer is responsibilities and his duties and his role in the implementation will be elaborated in the next few slides. We also have an officer who is known as an educating officer, or he is the legal entity. He is a lawyer and will be appointed by the state to actually handle any disputes and dispose of the cases. In every district, depending on the population, under the designated officer is a food safety officer or an FSO. The responsibility of the FSO is mainly to do inspection and monitor the operations of the FBOs to see if the FBOs, that is the food business operators, are meeting the requirements of the Food Safety and Standards Act and the Food Safety and Standards Act Rules and Regulations 2011. Between the designated officer and the food safety officer is the food analyst. The food analyst is in the laboratory and is responsible for analyzing the samples which have been taken for surveillance or due to the non-compliance to the Act by the food safety officer to get the analysis done and report to the designated officer. So in the state, the whole enforcement structure lies with the state food commissioner, the designated officer, and the food safety officer. The food analyst is only a helping hand to do the analysis. And the main role of the food safety officers and the designated officers is to carry out the registration and licensing of food business establishments. As per the Act, every food business operator must have a license or a registration to carry out the business. So if we look at the framework for how a food business operator gets his registration certificate or his license to carry out the food business is shown over here. So the CEO is the apex of the licensing and registration, and under him, every state, that is the 34 states in the country and the union territories, we have the state food authority, and that is the food commissioner, as I told you. Under the food commissioner, we have a registration authority, and the registration authority is in most states either the designated officer or the food safety officer. It could also be an official in the panchayat or in the municipal corporation or local body in an area notified by the state food safety commissioner. So where you get your registration will be notified in your state. If it is a very large state, it might be divided into smaller sections so that your registration is made easy. This is for registration. We will later see what is the difference between a registration and a license. So the registration authority can be number of people. However, the licensing authority in the state, the person who gives you a state license, is the designated officer. So if you want to start a food business in a particular state, you need to apply for a license to the designated officer. Please remember, every food business operator, as we saw in the morning, must have a license or a registration to carry out the business. At the center, we have a central licensing authority, and the central licensing authority is at the FSSAI headquarters, which is the licensing authority. What they have created is zonal officers of 4 zones. They have divided the whole of India into north, south, east, and west. And also we have one for the northeast. So here you have zonal officers, and these designated officers in these zones are responsible, or they have been given the responsibility of different states. All the details of who the Central Licensing Authority is available at the FSSAI website. If there is any change also, it is shown in the website. Now, in addition to the licensing authority and the designated officer at the ports of entry into the country, that is at the seaports and at the airports, we have, because food can be imported into the country through these areas, we have a person who's almost parallel to the designated officer, but is known as an authorized officer. So the role of the authorized officer is to look into the foods which are imported into the country. So good to remember who the food safety officer is, who is the designated officer, and who is the authorized officer and their roles. So now coming to the question, who should take a registration and who should take a license? What is the difference between a registration and a license, an FSSAI license? For registration, any petty food manufacturer FSSAI has defined who a petty food manufacturer is, must apply in Form A. So if you fall under the petty food manufacturer, you can apply for a registration. If you do not fall under the category of a petty food manufacturer, then you have to apply for either a central license or a state license in Form B. So all these have been laid down, and they are also there in the Act. The forms also are available online. The registration and licensing is all carried out online in a system that is known as EFLRS, that is the Food Licensing and Registration System. Now let us see who is a petty manufacturer and what is the definition for a petty food. A petty food manufacturer is a manufacturer who sells any article of food himself, or a petty retailer, hawker, or an itinerant vendor. So here, if you see any one of these who is a street food vendor, or who is vending vegetables, even carrying on the head, they are defined as petty food manufacturers. So these petty food manufacturers must take only a registration, and the registration fee is just rupees 100. In addition to these petty food manufacturers, those who are eligible to take only a registration are those food business operators or entrepreneurs who work at a small scale, or who work at the cottage or tiny food industry, and their annual turnover is less than rupees 12 lakh. So if the annual turnover is below rupees 12 lakh, you apply for a registration. If the production capacity is not greater than 500 liters of milk per day, you apply for the registration. Those who slaughter too big animals, who slaughter 50 birds, I'm sorry you cannot see this on this laptop, they all come under the registration. So all this is defined in the rules and regulations. So how do you apply for a registration? The procedure also is very simple. So you fill out the application in Form A. You apply online for the registration. Within 7 days of the applying online, you should get a receipt of the application. The food safety officer, if he decides that your application is complete, he will give you the registration certificate within a period of 7 days. If the food safety officer decides that he needs to conduct an inspection, and he needs, especially where the slaughtering of animals, etc., take place, the food safety officer or the respective authority for the registration will and can visit the site, see whether the site is suitable, and if it is not suitable, he can give you an improvement notice. However, if within 30 days you do not hear anything from the registering authority, that is the food safety officer or the municipal office or the panchayat member, you are allowed to start the business. So FSSAI has had this inbuilt system where the food business operator is not troubled and can start his business. But once you get the registration certificate, it is expected that this registration certificate with the photo identity which is issued to you will be displayed at a prominent place at the food business operation. That means whether it is a restaurant or whether you are a petty vendor, if you have a cart, everywhere you are supposed to display this registration certificate. Now, who is exempt from registration? The people who are exempt from registration are the producers of milk who are registered with the Dairy Cooperative Society. That means they come and sell their milk to the society. That is all the entire milk production they sell to the society, and the society is the one who further processes the milk and sells it. So there is an exemption, a single exemption to getting a registration certificate. Now, who are the FBOs who fall under central licensing? You will see that I have gone from registration directly to central licensing. So we know who are the FBOs who fall for registration. Now we will understand who the FBOs are who come under central licensing. Then the remaining people have to apply for a state license. So those who need to get a central license are dairy units or the milk chilling units who process more than 50,000 liters of liquid milk per day or 2,500 metric tons of milk solid per month. That is those who are making skim milk powder. For vegetable oil processing units, those units which have an installed capacity of greater than 2 metric tons per day. So those who are producing less than 2 metric tons can go for the state licensing if they are operating in a single state. All slaughterhouses who slaughter greater than 50 large animals or 150 or more small animals, including 1,000 or more poultry birds per day, need to take a central licensing. Meat processing units which handle about 50 kilograms of meat per day or 150 metric tons per annum come under the ambit of central licensing. All food processing units, other than what we just discussed, including the relabelers, that means, where you get your food manufactured by someone else, repackers, transporters, cold storage, those who have a cold storage, hotels, caterers, having installed capacity of more than 2 metric tons per day, except grain, cereals, and pulse milling units. So if you have a cold storage where you store more than 2 metric tons per day, you need to get a central license. All the export-oriented units, 100%, must take a central license. Now, one would ask the question, why should an export unit take the FSSAI license? Because they are only exporting it to another country whose rules and regulations are different from that of India. But most of the other countries require that you have a license of your parent country. So any Indian who wants to export a food must have the FSSAI license, although his product is not coming into the domestic market. All importers importing food items, including food ingredients and additives, must get a central license. So export-oriented units as well as import-oriented units must get the central license. A food business operator operating in 2 or more states, for example, if you have a food business in Karnataka and you have another business in Tamil Nadu and a third business in Kerala, you need to get a central license. The food catering services which fall under the agencies such as the railways, the airlines, the airport, the seaport, the defense, etc., also have to get a central license, not a state license, because they operate pan-India. So all food business operators manufacturing any food which contain ingredients which are not there in our standards, or if the safety of the food has not been established in our country, they have to get a central license. So using ingredients which are not permitted in India also requires the permission of the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Now, all these people come under central licensing. So we know who has to take a registration and who has to take a central license. Now, the rest of the people, those who are operating in the state, in a single state, will take the state license. So the licensing procedure is very similar to the registration procedure, and it is online. So if you take a state license, you need to do it in Form A. If you take a central license, you need to do it in Form B. So we have the EFLRS system, which is hosted by FSSAI New Delhi. So it includes filling the application, giving all the necessary documents. You have to give the status of the site. You have to also have who is the technical expert. You have to give the water report, that is the water which is being used in the manufacture. The whole list is given very clearly in the rules and regulations. If you do not hear from the FSO within 60 days of submitting your application, you can start the business. However, the food safety officer will go through the application, and if he decides to inspect the premises and look at the manufacturing thing, the FBO must allow the food safety officer to come. However, the whole application system should be completed within 50 days. If the license is rejected, you need to reapply. So every application for different types of food business operations has got a licensing fee, and the licensing fee has to be paid online. If the food safety officer finds that your premises is not clean or your potable water is not, he gives you in writing how you can improve it and submit your uh, application along with the improvements and how you have complied with the non-compliance given to you by the food safety officer. So this is a whole cycle which tells you. And remember here again, the responsibility of the food safety officer is defined, and he has to reply within 60 days. This was not there earlier. So, sometimes you had to wait a year or two to get your license. So what are the conditions of the license? You must display a true copy in a prominent place in the premises. You must allow the licensing authorities, whether it is the designated officer or the food safety officer, to visit the premises for the inspection. If you have made any change in the modifications and if you have added any new products, you must inform the food safety officer and get it added. You should have one technical person to supervise the production process, and he or she should have a degree in science. You have to furnish your annual returns every year, uh, every year by the 31st of March, but you have been given a grace time of 60 days to 31st May. Also, the FBO must ensure that no product other than the products indicated in the original license or registration are produced in the unit. Then the factory or the production unit must maintain sanitary and hygienic standards. There should be daily records of production. Also, you have to ensure that you source the raw materials from a reliable source and they are of optimum quality. The health and the hygiene of the personnel who are working in the premises must be maintained. You have to see that the restrooms The urinals, drains are well separated from the production area, and they are maintained in a hygienic way. You have to ensure that you have a regular, at least once in 7 days, the clean in place systems, which is involved in cleaning the machinery and the equipment. Then the FBO must get his product analyzed once in 6 months from an NABL accredited laboratory or a FSSAI notified laboratories. So if you have a big in-house laboratory like the giants such as ITC or Britannia or so, most of them have got in-house laboratories. Those laboratories also have to be NABL accredited. That is an ISO IEC 17025 accreditation. So this is a third party accreditation to tell you that the way you are testing is very competitive and professional. You must see that the temperature within the premises is maintained at the required temperature for production, and the manufacturer, importer, and the distributor shall buy and sell food products only from people who are registered or licensed by FSSAI, who have the FSSAI license or the FSSAI registration. So even if a food business operator wants to import any ingredient or food additive, he or she has to see that the importer is has an FSSAI license, and you should ask for the FSSAI license. Please remember that having an FSSAI license or putting the FSSAI logo on a food product does not mean that the product is certified by FSSAI. It only indicates that the food manufactured is manufactured with the knowledge of FSSAI. So you have a license for manufacturing. It is not a certification by FSSAI. This has been mistaken by many people that having the FSSAI logo is a certification. It is not a certification. It is only a registration or a license. The other conditions are, if you look at the proprietors of hotels, restaurants, food stalls, who sell the exposed foods, such as all the sweetmeats and savories, they must put up a list of those sweets which are cooked in ghee, edible oil, and vanaspati. They have to indicate which of the products is cooked in pure ghee, which is cooked in edible oil, and which is cooked in vanaspati. But you might tell me that you have visited many places and they do not display it. But this is a rule of the FSSAI. Very recently, FSSAI has also indicated that all these foods which are exposed for sale in hotels and restaurants, etc., must also carry the nutritional information. That is to tell you, for example, if you eat a masala dosa, how many calories that masala dosa is going to contribute to. So this is a very recent regulation. So anybody who is cooking, selling cooked or prepared food should also display a notice board containing the nature of the articles being exposed for sale. So these are some of the conditions with which the license to the food business operator is given. But under these licenses, the license for edible oil products have a few other conditions, in that the manufacturers of edible oil and their products, including the ghani, that is the crushed oil, crude oil extraction, wholesale dealers in butter, ghee, vanaspati, they must maintain a register which shows how much of the product is manufactured, received, sold, and the quantity of the de-oiled meal and edible food product. This has to be maintained on a day-to-day basis. So the food safety officer has the authority to come and inspect this record and check whether it is being kept. In addition to this, all edible oil processors of vegetable oil have to have a laboratory of their own. There should be a laboratory facility for analyze and within the premises. This is the only food business operation where this requirement is a must under the Act. So in Schedule 4 has been put down what are the requirements on hygienic and sanitary practices that must be followed by the food business operator. One is the location and the surroundings have to be clean. The layout and design of the food establishment premises must be available. The equipment and containers must be regularly cleaned, the clean in space, the hygiene, and how all these are maintained, how the hygiene and sanitary practices are maintained. For the facilities, they must have the water test report, whether it is potable or non-potable. They also have to have SOPs for cleaning utensils, washing of raw materials, the ice and steam generators, how the hygiene and sanitary for their drainage and waste disposal, how do the personnel maintain the hygiene and sanitary, how in the toilet or the washroom, if there is a wash basin, there is expected to be a wash basin at the entry of the restrooms and the toilets. They should have the reports for their air quality and ventilation, and there should be sufficient lighting in the manufacturing unit. So now let us come to the designated officer. Who is the officer responsible for giving the license? In addition to giving the license, he has several other responsibilities. So one of his major role is to issue or cancel the license of the FBO if he is not satisfied with the operations and any other discrepancies or non-conformances in the food business. He is responsible for prohibiting the sale of any food which does not meet the Food Safety and Standards Act rules and regulations. He is the one who makes a recommendation to the commissioner to launch a prosecution that are punishable with imprisonment for non-compliance to the Act. DO is the one who receives the report and samples from the food safety officer and gets them analyzed by the referral food laboratory. And we will see in the next slide or so how the analysis is carried out and what is the difference between a state laboratory and a referral food laboratory. He is also responsible for sanctioning or launching prosecutions in case of contraventions with time. He should investigate any written complaint made vocally or orally or in writing in respect to the contraventions or the non-compliance. He also should keep a record for all the inspections and actions carried out by the FSO. As I said, the FSO will visit the premises and look at the sanitary, the hygiene, etc., that is maintained in the manufacturing facility. And as we have seen, the designated officer is superior in hierarchy to the food safety officer, and so therefore he has to investigate any complaint which is made against the FSO. So the responsibilities of the designated officer are detailed in the rules. So, who is the food safety officer? The food safety officer can be compared with the traffic inspector. So, the traffic inspector is one who sees that you wear the helmet, that you have a license, that you follow all the traffic rules. So, similar here, the food safety officer is the officer to see that the food business operator follows all the rules and regulations of FSSAI. So, what are his powers? He can take a sample of any food or substance if he suspects that it is in contravention of the law. He can seize any article of food and keep it in safe custody. He is allowed to enter the food business manufacturing area where any food is manufactured. He can enter warehouses where they are stored, that is, retailers, warehouses, distribution warehouses. He can enter where any food is stored for the manufacture, means any ingredients are stored, where any food is exposed or exhibited for sale, where any adulterant is manufactured. If he enters a premises and he finds that there is an adulterant being manufactured, he is allowed to take the sample and inform the designated officer. The food safety officer, as he said, is very powerful, so they are able to destroy, deteriorate any perishable products after giving notice in writing to the FBO. The only difference between a traffic inspector and a food safety officer is a food safety officer cannot put a fine directly at the point, but has to get the sample analyzed in a laboratory and wait for the report. Unlike the traffic police who catch you and give you, a fine, asking you to pay the fine whether it is required or not. So the food safety officer may seize any adulterant found. So what you see on the left-hand side over here is an adulterant of green color being applied to the tinda. So it remains green. Or if he finds that there is water for adulteration of milk, or even spraying pesticides on the fruit which is available in them. So the food safety officer is very powerful, especially in terms of enforcement and surveillance of the food products to be in accordance with the Act and the rules and regulations. But the duties are that he should inspect all license units as prescribed by the DO and maintain a record. He must verify and satisfy the conditions of the license are being complied. You see, in the previous two slides, we had said what are the conditions of the license. So one of the conditions is it must be displayed. So he can check whether it is displayed. He can check the sanitary and the hygienic conditions of the place. He can also procure the sample and send it for analysis. He can investigate any complaint which is received by him in contravention of the provisions of the Act. He has to maintain a database of all the FBOs to whom he has issued a license or a registration certificate. And also he has to recommend and issue improvement notices wherever he finds that there is a contravention or a non-compliance to the Act. But in this Act, the food safety officer is also has a liability. If he cannot do this vexatiously, he cannot seize any article of food or adulterant without a reason. If he commits any other act causing injury of any person without having reason to believe is necessary for the execution of the duty, anybody, food business operators are allowed to give complaints to the designated officer if the food safety officer is harassing them. If found guilty of an offense, the food safety officer is liable to pay a penalty up to 1 lakh. So this is something new which has come into the act earlier. But unlike the traffic police, you see, even though they can unwantingly trouble you and fine you for simple things, the food safety officer has to be very careful when he is picking up samples from food business operators. It should not be intentional. It should not be with a vicious attitude. It should be very unbiased, the way he picks up the samples. So the basic principles for picking up the sample by the food safety officer is, when he picks up the sample should represent the food as sold to the customer, and each part of the divided sample should be a truly representative of the original. We will see how he does this. He can divide the sample, and all the parts of the sample divided also must be representative. The sampling process, when he picks it up and keeps it in storage or transport it should not alter the sample in any way that might affect the analysis. The storage and the transportation must not alter it in a significant way. If he is picking up a sample for microbiology analysis, it must be transported, picked up in aseptic conditions, transported in aseptic conditions, at refrigerated conditions, because the sample should not deteriorate. So the procedure for taking the samples also has been laid down. So the food safety officer cannot just walk into your premises and pick up a sample. He has to call one or more witness at the time of taking the sample. He has to obtain the signature of one or two persons in all forms and documents. He must give in writing to the food business operator in Form 5A that his intention is to pick up the sample, and on the Form 5A, he must have the signature of the FBO or the thumb impression. If the FBO refuses to sign the Form 5A, then the FBO takes the signature of the two witnesses he has taken with him. So here, this Form 5A is to ensure that the food safety officer is informing the food business operator and is not harassing the operator. So if we look at how this sampling takes place, so it is the food safety officer who visits a food business operator if he feels that they are in contravention of the act and the rules and the regulations. He informs the food business operator in terms of Form 5A before lifting the sample. He has to take the signature or thumb impression of the food business operator, and which is more important is the food safety officer has to pay for the sample. He has to pay the FBO the amount of the sample as it is being sold to the public. So you see here, this act has taken into account, what it has. So he cannot walk in and just, pick up 10 packets and not pay for it. He has to pay for whatever sample he picks up. And if you look at it, the 4 samples that are he has to pick up either 4 samples or he has to divide the sample into 4, and we will see how the procedure goes on further. So here is Form 5A. So he gives in writing to the food business operator that he has taken from the premises certain number of samples specified below, given a code number, and he has signed, and the signature of the food business operator is required. So in the official sample collection, what are the things the food safety officer has to do and not do? He has to take a representative sample. That means it represents the whole lot. He has to take a proper sample size. He must use suitable containers for sampling. He cannot take it in newspaper. He cannot take it in old paper or a cardboard box lying around. He has to use appropriate preservatives to prevent spoilage. For example, if he is taking milk and it is going to take quite some time to transport it to the lab, in the act and in the rules, he has to add formalin to it, 40 drops of formalin to it. If he is using picking up samples for microbiology, he has to use sterile sampling equipment and maintain the aseptic environment. So what you see on the left is the correct way of taking a sample by wearing gloves and picking up the sample so that the contamination has not come from your hands. Whereas in the lower panel, you see a food safety officer with bare hands just picking up the sweetmeats. So that is not the correct way of collecting a sample. The food safety officer has to use the correct equipment for collecting the sample. It should not be just by using the hand. The common tools which are used are pliers, the spoon, the screwdriver, especially for cheese, scissors, a corkscrew opener, a knife. These are generally used for opening the shipping containers or cutting bags and scooping out food products. So a special opener for opening cardboard without damaging the carton. You have the dippers or suitable size for liquids, which are shown at the far right. Then you have a dry borer tube for flour, dried milk, and dried milk products. So what you see, if you turn it, it opens. If you pick up the sample and then you close it. You use the metal probes, often referred to as bag triers, as you will see in the next slide. So you use bag triers if you are trying to pick up the grain from a bag. So the bag triers are instrument to assist in the collection of sample for your grain from seed bags. Procedures are there to collect the sample, the representative sample from the seed bags. You can use plated probes and triers for sampling again seeds and containers. Then special probes are available to collect the sample from butter, cheese, meat. These, as you can see in the picture shown, are used to cut out cylindrical plugs. You wear gloves and you take out, because with these cylindrical gloves you can go to with the cylindrical equipment you can go to the center of the cheese or the meat. And it is very important to ensure that all the equipment that are used do not cross contaminate one sample to the other, and they are sterilized. So the containers also have to be proper containers. So the samples which are not pre-packed or open cans or packets should first be placed in a clean, dry, grease-proof container such as wide-mouth glass, plastic jars, stainless steel metal cans. Jars and bottles can be suitably closed. Plastic food quality plastic bags should be sealed securely after filling so that they do not leak, and alcoholic drinks and others can be placed in glass bottles of appropriate size which have leak-proof caps. So the official sample collection, before collecting the sample, the FSO or the authorized officer at the port must observe the lot from which the sample is collected and record all the relevant information. What was the size? How many packets there were? What was the type of packaging? What was the container size or sizes? What was the product number or control numbers? How many consignments were there? What is the labeling information? And what is the condition of the package? If there is evidence of rodent or insect attack, they can take pictures and have it documented. And when they take a sample, it is expected that the food safety officer will restore the original sample container to what it was. So if he has taken it from a sealed box, you have taken a sample, the box should be, after the sample collection, should be resealed, re-glued, and restacked where it was. Sacks or bags which were opened to take the grain must be refilled and closed. These operations require physical effort, but it is essential to leave the stock in saleable condition, and the refilled units must not get contaminated. There should not be cross contamination. So that is why when the equipment is used, the equipment has to be washed and it should be sterilized. So the quantity of the sample to be collected, FSSAI, under the provision of rule number 13, has directed how much of sample has to be collected and sent to the laboratory for analysis. So here is a portion of the table from the rules, where you see milk 500 ml is to be collected. If you see evaporated milk, it is 200 grams. Malt food, it is 300 grams. Vanaspati 250. Carbonated water 600 ml. Baking powder 100 grams. So in the list in the Act are covered all the items of the food product standards. So payment of the sample cost, as I said, it is essential that the food safety officer or the purchaser, because in this act, the common consumer is also allowed to pick up a sample and get it analyzed. We will see the detail of this when we do laboratory analysis and sampling. So, but the food safety officer or the consumer who picks up the sample must pay the food business operator the cost of such a sample. So if you're getting a packet of biscuit analyzed, you must pay the cost of the biscuits to the food business operator at the rate at which it is being sold. There is no concession. Where the sample of the article, the exemption is when the sample of the article of food is imported, the cost of the sample and the cost of testing is to be borne by the importer. In the case of the indigenous samples, that is the domestic samples, the cost of the sample is paid by the food safety officer. So the food safety officer or the authorized officer who is at the port is responsible for collecting, holding, sealing, storing, and delivering the sample in a manner that will prevent it from being changed. So that is why they need to use the correct equipment. They need to use clean and sterilized equipment. They need to have aseptic conditions. If it has to be stored in the cold, they should carry an ice box. And if it has to be sealed, they should carry a sealer. Next, whoever receives this sample in the laboratory should have the same responsibility. That is, the sample should not in any way change from how it was picked up. So it is very important that the food safety officer or the authorized officer is able to document the sample integrity from time of collection. Nowadays, with the mobile phones and with the digitalization, all this can be made very easy for sample collection. So now, how does the food safety officer dispatch the samples to the laboratories for analysis? Because if you recollect, one of the duties of the food safety officer is to send the sample for analysis. So the primary duty of the food safety officer is to pick up 4 samples or to pick up one big sample, divide it into 4 equal parts so that they are representative. He sends one part of the sample for analysis to the state food lab. that is the primary laboratory in the state. The 2 parts of the sample are sent to the designated officer, and the 4th part of the sample, if the FBO demands or doesn't have faith in the testing of the state laboratory, the FBO can pay the testing charges and ask the FSO to get the sample analyzed at one of the FSSAI notified laboratories, which are also NABL accredited. Now, when the analysis is done, the report will be sent to the designated officer, and then we will see, when we do laboratory sampling, what is the role of the referral food laboratory. So the function or the duty of the food safety officer is to send the sample. One of his functions is to send the sample to the state food lab. So when he does the sampling, as I said, he should make the sample into 4, or he should pick up 4 samples. When he picks up 4 individual samples, all of them must have the same lot and batch number and manufacturing date. And if you recollect, if the lot number, the sample with a particular lot number or batch number is in contravention of the rules and regulations, the whole batch is considered to be non-compliant. Or if he collects the sample, if it is a grain, he should divide the grain into 4 equal parts. So one portion of the sample is sent to the food analyst. The second and third portion of the sample is sent to the designated officer, and the 4th portion of the sample, if demanded by the food business operator, is sent to one of the FSSAI notified laboratories. These laboratories are recognized by FSSAI, and the lists are put up on the website. And so the food business operator has the prerogative of getting his sample analyzed by a third party. So when the food safety officer sends the sample, FSSAI has laid down regulation to how the sample should be sent. It is indicated that it should have a label. In addition to the container, which should be sterile and clean, you should have a code number. The name of the food safety officer along with his designation should be there with the signature, date and place of collection, nature of articles being sent for analysis, and if any preservative has been added, that also must be indicated on the label of the sample. So packing the sample for dispatch also is laid down. So it very clearly says the sample should be wrapped with thick waterproof paper. It should contain a seal. Every food safety officer has a seal with a different impression. There should be a minimum of 4 seals. There can be more than 4 seals on it on the outer cover. It should be tied with securing thread or twine. But more importantly, it should have the signature and thumb impression of the FBO on the outer cover. There should be the DO or the FSO code, as you can see, the securing thread and time. And at the bottom, you should have the DO or the food safety officer's signature. This sample, which has the DO signature, is the sample which is sent to the referral food laboratory, because the sample sent to the referral food laboratory is from the DO's office. So here is the form 6, in which the memorandum is sent to the food analyst. So the food safety officer sends the memorandum on, and it gives the code, the date and place of collection, the nature of the sample, and the nature and quantity of the preservatives. And also, if you see point number 2, it is a copy of this memo and specimen impression of the seal used seal packet are being sent. So one copy of the Form 6 is kept along with the sample to be dispatched, and the other sample, the other copy of Form 6 with the impression of, okay, this must match the label on the sample bottle, very important for the food safety officer. And he has to send the copy of the memo with the impression of the seal. So this seal impression must be sent separately to the parcel, so that either the referral food laboratory or the state food laboratory can verify the seals on the sample and the seals of what the food safety officer sends. So once the sample is picked up, the food safety officer sends it to the food analyst, that is the state food laboratory, and there the state food laboratory first carries out a documentation, and if the sample is found unfit, if it is broken, if it is putrefied, if they can see fungal growth, etc., the analyst will inform the food safety officer about the status of the sample being unfit for analysis. So the food safety officer would have kept two parts of the sample with the designation officer, so he can pick up one of the samples which are with the DO and send it to the food analyst for analyzing. Now, if the analysis cannot be carried out in the stipulated time of 14 days, it is expected that the analysis is to be completed in 14 days, the analyst will inform the food safety officer. The details of the sample analysis and sampling analysis will be taken in the class when I cover the chapter on laboratory and sampling. So this completes the enforcement, that is how the rules of the enforcement of FSSAI rules and regulations are enforced all over the country. So on Monday, I will take the class on standards, food product standards, and food additives.